Okay, in this tutorial we're going to go ahead and create a macro. If you're doing this for the first time, you probably don't have this developer tab right here that has all the macro recording options, but it's very easy to bring it up if you don't have that. Just right click anywhere on the toolbar, click on Customize Quick Access Toolbar, go to Popular, make sure that this option is checked, Show Developer tab in the ribbon, and just press OK, and this tab will show up. Now, to record a macro, well, one of the things that I want to point out that by default, all of the macros that you record are recorded with an absolute reference. To record a macro with a relative reference, you have to check another option, and we'll go over that in this tutorial. But first, we're just going to go ahead and create a simple macro. To record a macro, click on the Record Macro button and give it a name. I'm just going to call this Mac table. And because I've already created this macro for another demo, it's going to prompt me that it already exists. Do you want to replace it? And I'm just going to click on yes, I want to replace it. So to record the macro, in this macro, the process that I want to automate is that I want to create table headings. So for example, if I have, let's say, the serial number, I have name, email, and notes. So on every sheet, I just want to go ahead and automate this process. Well, not only that, but I also want to make a few changes to the text. I want to change the color. I want to make sure that it has a nice background and that they're all center aligned. And that's pretty much it. Okay, and I'm done. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on Stop Macro. Now my macro has been recorded. So if I go to Sheet 2, and I already have some data in here. Let's say I've got some names in here. And I wanted to just populate the column names. To do that, I will just go to Macros, and here's the macro that we just recorded, the Mac table, and I'll click on Run It. And you'll notice that it automatically populated these fields right here, starting from the first column. Now, the point about absolute reference that I was making was that it does not matter where I am in the spreadsheet. So let's say if I'm in cell I10, and if I run the macro, it will always go back to the first row and the first column, which is cell A1, and it will populate those fields. But let's say that if my data started in the middle of the sheet, let's say if it started from D8, and I have, let's say, some data here, I've got some names here, and I've got some notes for these names, and I wanted to do the same thing. I wanted to create the column headings, but I want them to start here instead of A1. Well, to do that, I have to record a macro with relative reference. To do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this Use Relative Reference button. Make sure that this is checked. Now click on Record Macro, and I'm just going to call this Mac Table Relative Reference, and click on OK. Now I'm going to go ahead and start typing column headings. So just the serial number, name, and notes. And I want these to be a different color. I want them to be bold, centered, and give it a nice fill. And that's pretty much it. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on Stop Recording. I'm going to stop the macro now. So now I've just created a macro with the relative reference. So the difference is that the relative reference is going to start wherever my cell is. So let's say if I'm just going to copy this data to another sheet, I'm just going to press Control C and Control V to paste the data, and I want my headings starting here. I want my headings to start here from E7. So I'm just going to make sure that E7 is selected. I'm going to go to macro and just run the relative macro. And if I click on run it, you'll notice that it populates the field starting here instead of A1. So that's the difference between the relative and the absolute macros. So whichever macro you want to record, just make sure that you have the relative reference option selected or deselected. And that's pretty much it. To save your spreadsheet, when you click on save, if you click on save, let me just resize this window here. I guess I can't resize it, but I can move it. Okay, if I click on save, it's going to give you a message that this spreadsheet has a macro in it. So do you want to save it? Or, well, actually what it's telling me is that it can't save it because it has a macro in it. So I have to choose a different file extension for this. So continue using a free, so I'm just going to click on no here. Make sure that from the drop down menu the XLSM, which is the Excel macro enabled worksheet, is checked, and then click on save, and that should do the trick.